Wraith by William Toney. Chapter 17. Threads Unraveling. The city buzzed with its usual chaotic rhythm as Aaron strolled down the dimly lit street, his thoughts as turbulent as the dark clouds rolling across the sky. His encounter with Lilah at the hospital had shaken him more than he cared to admit. Seeing her awake, her voice warm and filled with concern, was a relief he hadn't realized he desperately needed. But it was also a reminder of the distance growing between them, a gulf widened by the secrets he carried. Beside him, Allistor's presence loomed like a storm cloud. The demon wore his usual sardonic grin, golden eyes gleaming with an unnatural light as he matched Aaron's pace effortlessly. "She's sharp, that one," Allistor said, breaking the silence. "You might think you're hiding things, but she's already piecing it together. Isn't it delightful?" Aaron shot him a glare. "This isn't a game, Allistor. Lilah doesn't need to be dragged into this." Allistor smirked, a hint of mockery in his tone. "Oh, but she already is, my dear boy. Whether you tell her the truth or not, she'll find her way into the thick of it. Humans and their insatiable curiosity. You'd think you'd have learned that by now." Aaron didn't respond. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets, his mind drifting to the night he buried Marcus alive, to the terrified faces of the gang members he'd hunted. His actions had been deliberate, calculated, and yet they haunted him more than he cared to admit. "Second thoughts?" Allistor asked, his tone dripping with amusement. "Don't tell me you're losing your nerve." Aaron stopped in his tracks, turning to face the demon. "I'm not losing anything. I'm just tired." "Tired, he says," Allistor mused, as if the word were a foreign concept. "Power is exhausting, isn't it? Especially when you insist on using it with such restraint. Imagine what you could accomplish if you stopped holding back." Aaron didn't reply, his gaze fixed on the neon glow of a diner across the street. He didn't notice the figure watching him from the shadows, a figure whose eyes burned with obsessive admiration. Jason Black adjusted his grip on the hunting knife at his side, his fingers trembling with excitement. He had followed the stories, the whispers in the dark about a man called the Wraith, a vigilante who tore through the city's underworld like a shadow made flesh. Jason idolized him, his mind consumed by the idea of someone who wielded justice without mercy. But he also found himself frustrated. Aaron had left too many alive, too many criminals with stories to tell. Jason didn't understand the restraint, couldn't fathom the point of mercy. "I'll show him," Jason muttered under his breath, his eyes locked on Aaron's retreating figure. "I'll show him how it's done." Elsewhere in the city, Councilman Charles Wright paced the length of his spacious office, his frustration simmering just below the surface. He held his phone tightly, waiting for an answer that never came. "It's been weeks," he growled, slamming the device onto his desk. "Marcus was supposed to keep things under control. How does an entire gang just disappear?" A soft laugh echoed from the corner of the room. "Such passion, Charles. I almost find it endearing." Charles turned to face Eris, who lounged on his leather couch as if it were her throne. Her silver hair shimmered under the dim light, and her pale eyes sparkled with mischief. The pendant around his neck glowed faintly, tethering her to the physical world. "Spare me the commentary, Eris," Charles snapped. "This is serious. Without Marcus, the unrest in the city is going unchecked. It's chaos out there." Eris stretched lazily, her lips curving into a smirk. "Oh, you poor thing. You wanted chaos, remember? Or have you forgotten our little deal?" Charles glared at her. "I wanted controlled chaos, something I could use to my advantage. Not this." Eris shrugged, clearly unbothered. "Chaos is chaos, darling. Trying to control it is like trying to leash the wind." She rose gracefully and sauntered toward him, her gaze sharp and playful. "Besides, you have me. What more could you possibly need?" Charles sighed, his fingers brushing against the pendant. "You're supposed to help me. That was the deal." "And I am helping," Eris said, her tone mockingly sweet. "But I have to admit, watching you flounder is endlessly entertaining." Before Charles could retort, Eris turned her attention to the window, where a pair of interns walked past on the street below. A wicked grin spread across her face. "Oh, let's have some fun," she purred. Charles's eyes narrowed. "Eris, don't—" But it was too late. She raised a hand, and the interns froze mid-step, their faces contorting in confusion and fear. One of them clutched his head, letting out a strangled scream as visions only he could see played out in his mind. The other collapsed to his knees, weeping uncontrollably. Eris watched with delight, clapping her hands. "Oh, they're so fragile. It's adorable." Charles stormed toward her, his voice low and furious. "Stop it! Now!" Eris rolled her eyes but snapped her fingers. The interns stumbled to their feet, dazed and trembling, before quickly fleeing down the street. "You're no fun," she pouted, turning back to him. "You really should learn to enjoy the little things." Charles clenched his fists, his temper barely in check. "You're going to ruin everything." "Ruin?" Eris echoed, feigning innocence. "Darling, I'm the only reason you've gotten this far. Don't forget that." Her gaze turned cold, and for a moment the playful mask slipped. "You're an ant playing at being a king, Charles. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can command me." Charles swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He hated how much he needed her, hated the power she held over him. But for now he had no choice but to play along. Back at the diner, Aaron sat across from Lilah, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Her eyes searched his face, taking in the sharp lines of his jaw, the weariness in his gaze. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world, and she couldn't ignore the change in him. "You've been avoiding me," she said softly. Aaron met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't avoiding you. I just didn't want to drag you into this." "This?" she repeated. "Aaron, I've been in the dark for weeks. Marlowe's been saying things, and I don't know what to believe. You've changed. You're not the same person I knew." Aaron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been trying to make things right, Lilah. To fix what happened to you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't need you to fix anything, Aaron. I need you to talk to me, to let me in." He opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of shattering glass interrupted him. Both of them turned to see a man outside, his face pale and bloodied, stumbling toward the diner. Aaron's heart sank as he recognized the man, a low-level thug he had interrogated days ago. "Allistor," Aaron muttered under his breath. "This wasn't supposed to happen." Allistor appeared beside him, his grin sharp and unrepentant. "Oh, my dear boy, the game is just getting started.